Welcome to the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel, which aims to provide you with language, tools, and guidance in your journey towards personal and relational wholeness. We'll discuss topics ranging from psychology, spirituality, leadership, sexuality, and more. My name is Michael, and I'll be your guide for stimulating musings and host for insightful interviews with thought leaders, practitioners, and experts who have a thing or two to share about living an integrated and meaning-making life. Whether you're looking to deepen your connection with your interior world, overcome challenges in your relationships, or expand your psychosomatic horizons with fresh perspectives and paradigms, the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel offers a safe, playful, yet challenging space for dialogue and introspection. It is all a gift, so let's go enjoy it together. I have the absolute delight and pleasure to have Kayla Felten here with me to talk about psychedelics and religious trauma and how those things intersect. I have the absolute pleasure to have Kayla Felten here with us today to talk about psychedelics, spiritual abuse, religious trauma, and how those all intersect. And I'm honestly just so excited for this conversation, Kayla. I feel like not only does it resonate, I know it will resonate with our listeners, but it also will be that kind of stretching edge, right? Talking about plant-based medicine, psychedelics, and like how they help us heal, because there's such a stigma even to this day around that conversation. So I'm excited for the illumination you'll bring to it and just how that will move our consciousness forward a bit. Kayla, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and just kind of share who you are, what you have come from, your background, and what you're passionate about.
Well, thank you, Michael, for having me on this podcast. I really enjoy getting to geek out on these intersections of religious trauma, spiritual abuse, and psychedelics. Let's keep it groovy. Let's keep it interesting. But it's going to be heavy. It's going to be a trip.
Yeah.
I often identify as the Miss Frizzle of transcendence. And so it's a magic school bus ride. I don't know where this is going to go.
Oh my God.
Wear seatbelts on. We're going to be safe, you know.
I feel like someone needs to create like one of those like cartoon like avatars of you that's like an intersection of you and Miss Frizzle. Would that not be so
I would love amazing? That. Let's call that in, Michael. Anyone listening, I will absolutely delight in a Miss Frizzle avatar.
I love it. Oh, yeah.
So I grew up in a pretty fundamentalist evangelical culture called the Plymouth Brethren. I was born and raised in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And when I was 18, I moved to the Twin Cities, Minnesota to attend Bethel University. For the entirety of my adulthood, I've been a career social worker. I was a middle school social worker for 7 years, and then I made a solid switch up into psychedelic therapy. And I have worked in a ketamine clinic in Mendota Heights, Minnesota called Intero Psychedelic for the last 5, maybe going on 6 years now. And it was actually during the time, it was my last 2 years probably of working at the middle school before I switched to the psychedelic clinic, that I also launched the Reclamation Collective, which is a religious trauma and spiritual abuse advocacy organization. And our primary work is virtual support groups. So we're able to invite an international crew of survivors to be able to hold that space for honoring the deconstruction and reclamation processes, as well as more specific support around spiritual abuse and how that can transcend above and beyond and outside of religious spaces. This is not wholly and organic to Christianity or to any religion. Fundamentalism, that is, can be applied to any notion, any idea, any belief. When you believe that you possess absolute truth and it is true for everyone, that's the fundamentalism of it all. And unfortunately, fortunately for me in terms of my career and my passions of getting to geek out on podcasts about this, but unfortunately for just the reality of how much overlap there are in psychedelic spaces, ceremonial spaces, religious spaces, and the room for spiritual abuse, religious trauma, to be addressed, in some cases to be healed, but also in other cases to be really wounding.
Yeah, what you just shared about really, I mean, fundamentalism is not one thing. It's any time you feel like you possess absolute truth. And I love that definition. It brings up a really core quote from Plato that has been core in my work, which is every light casts a shadow, and the closer you get to the light, the larger that shadow becomes. And it's not about leaving this and like going over here to this other extreme, though that might be a step in the process. But ultimately, healing and wholeness looks like living in both, right? Like being able to move in all those different streams without going to one extreme or the other. Yeah. Would you share a bit more about your story around the religious fundamentalist backdrop of your life, and then how you got to where you got to around work with psychedelics and religious trauma?
Yes. So being raised in the Plymouth Brethren, I didn't think that I had an odd childhood. I still will stand by saying I had a very happy childhood. I had very supportive parents. I had very present parents as well. And they invested a lot of time and money and effort in us being able to travel to Bible camp, to Bible conferences, to visit family, located all across, the country. And so I feel like in many ways it was a very privileged, very blessed, childhood. And also, it's a little bit of a complicated, nuanced, perception to take now as I've deconstructed or been deconstructing. I'm forever going to be in this process of deconstructing, but recognizing some of the really oppressive, the really supremacist, and some of the really toxic beliefs and narratives that informed my reality. And the ways that some of those beliefs continue to limit and continue to limit me, continue to harm me, and the ways that I've embodied bigotry and ways that I've embodied supremacy across my lifetime. I would say that I wasn't ever taught that I was better than anybody because I was white. So when I think of supremacy, I think most of us have this thought of like white supremacists. And I don't think that I thought I was better because I was white. I think I thought I was better because I had the supreme relationship with God, with theology, with morality. I was a child of God. And because I'm white, that did end up being embodied as a supremacy. That's especially more obvious and extremely not cute on a white lady.
It's not flattering.
No, it's not. And so also, I had said that I had moved to the Twin Cities to attend Bethel University. And during those years, I had studied abroad in Guatemala for a semester. I was 19 years old. And I feel like that time and space fully away from my culture of origin, my community of origin, my denomination of origin. I was still there, obviously, in association with a faith-based university, with a faith-based organization in Guatemala. But I feel like that was exactly kind of the time and space and distance that I needed to be more explorative about what is holy and organic to Kayla Felten, what is my beliefs, what feels aligned with my spirituality and with my spirit. And it was still, from that point, it was still easily 7-8 years that I still was wanting to identify as Christian. I still was wanting to find a church community that fit this more kind of progressive idea of what was possible, and being in relationship to God. And in many ways, I'm honestly grateful that I had that time, that it felt like an evolution. It wasn't a one day the carpet fell from underneath me. It was truly an evolution of, I still identify as a Christian, but I understand the Plymouth Brethren is not for me or anyone with a vagina.
Mm-hmm.
I understood that.
Yes. Yeah.
I understood that. And then I was finding, churches that maybe, yeah, that just maybe I was hoping they would fit a more gentle spirit of the God that I had experienced. And I still would say this is complicated for me to talk about in retrospect because I still identify as a deeply spiritual person. I mean, I think that's just like a thread that I can honor my inner child who was deeply intuitive, knew some things didn't feel right. I can honor my inner teenager, in early 20s as I'm like deconstructing and like, I don't think that this religion is actually deeper access to the divine,
Yeah.
And then I experienced mushrooms. The mushrooms definitely had something to do with me being able to like connect to my spirit, to a greater force and be like, whoa, yeah, I cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater in the sense of like, there is still something greater
Yeah.
than me, and maybe there's a greater part of me.
Huh.
Maybe the greater is like a part of me.
Yeah.
And if I can connect to my spirit in this way, and if I can be blown away, taken away on a trip, I don't know what I'm going to see. I don't know what I'm going to feel, but I know that it's going to be information. It's going to be wisdom. It's going to be insight for me to integrate into my life. I just feel very grateful that I was able to commune with mushrooms in a safe way at the time when I did. I was about 26, maybe 27 years old in that first communion.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So with like, okay, the first question is, what is the thing? Like, what's the meta shift that you experienced from this kind of very patriarchal, supremacist, religious container, after your first psychedelic experience? You talked about like God is within me, the universe is within me. That like I hear some tones of the shift there, but like give more language and words to that big shift.
Yeah. I mean, I think that prior to that mushrooms journey, that initial journey was, so much grief, but also rage, also resentment, also just like, kind of like playing that pendulum, right? Of like, I was a fundamentalist Christian for so much of my life, and I was raised in that culture. And then I kind of was making that pendulum shift to being like a fundamentalist, not atheist, but kind of like anti-Christian, right? Like I just had this pendulum of being like, that's wrong, that's evil, that's oppressive, that's disgusting. How can people believe that? And I actually think that the mushrooms came in hot, ready to be like, actually, this is just another realm of fundamentalism, babe. You're just swinging the pendulum to another realm of fundamentalism. And it was, it was a mind fuck in that I was just like, wait a second, maybe I don't have to be afraid of coming into knowing of another God with he, him pronouns, another white Jesus. Maybe I can just trust that if there is something greater, it's actually rooted in love, and I had a message come through, a pretty direct message come through in that mushrooms journey as well, which just was like, there's not too much love. And I was holding on to some guilt and some shame around just finding myself in a pretty non-traditional dynamic partnership, and also recognizing like I have romantic love for multiple people. And I think especially being raised in a purity culture where your whole life is about, especially as a woman, the greatest achievement you will ever have in this life is to be chosen by a man. By one man, and monogamy isn't even a word because it's the only option, and you don't want to, have too much love or intimacy or connection, and certainly not sex with multiple people before you get married, because all of your love and abundance and sacred sensuality it belongs to this other human being. And so I had come into that journey in a season of some shame, some guilt, some just bewilderment of like, I don't know that like a traditional marriage to a man is going to be my game. And I had a message come through so clear of like, too much love is not the problem. Too much love is not the problem.
you're connecting this conversation actually with the episode on non-monogamy and just kind of addressing monogamy as a unseen atmospheric construct. It's like, yeah, it's the air you breathe. Of course you don't see it. You know what I mean? And what would it be like to question the air? You know, and I mean, I can even say, being divorced, I've had this realization like, oh my God, I don't think I ever actually wanted to be married. I want secure attachment. I want ongoing friendship, relationship. But like, I think I am a person that needs ample alone time. Like 75-25 kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I really need that. And this, what you're bringing forward here is, it's not a hyper individualism. It's actually like a deeper connectedness. And that connectedness is both for you, and it connects you to the universe and to other people. Like, I feel like the supremacy of the religious tradition that I grew up in was highly othering. It was like my community had to get narrower and narrower and narrower because I could not relate to people who had difference. I had to be in this, equally yoked with all of my friends and relationships. But once you break outside of that and you have these kinds of experiences, whether they're psychedelic through plant-based medicine, or there's like, synchronistic happenings that just stumble into your life and kind of change your life forever, whatever it is, if we can respond to those and just kind of soften and allow those to transform us, like, we'll find authentic spirituality, like our authentic way of engaging with the divine. And I don't know. I feel like that is the trajectory for everyone. Like, you don't have to get rid of what you grew up around. It just becomes like that's the thing you came from, and you've moved beyond, but you've integrated it as well.
Exactly. It's that integration piece. But I think that I was having this guilt, right, for having love. And I realized that I was expecting to feel guilty. I was told that I should feel guilty because it's a sin against God. It's a sin against God to have premarital sex. And I had done that by that point in my life as well. And I realized that, like, this isn't my guilt. Like, I don't feel guilty. I'm here feeling anxious because I should feel guilty, because I've been told my whole life that I would be an abomination, that I would be creating this great divide between me and my Savior, in choosing me and choosing love and observing where I'm experiencing love, not with born-again believers, holy men looking to get married tomorrow. And I realized, like, actually, that guilt doesn't belong to me. It belongs to my culture of origin. It belongs to my family of origin, my community, but it actually isn't mine because I don't feel it. And I think that the mushrooms, that altered state, the kind of distance from yourself, back at yourself, was helpful for me to be like, oh, I actually don't feel guilty about this. And that felt associated with that narrative of too much love is not the problem, babe. That's not the problem.
Okay, so can you give a backdrop to this conversation? Because I'm listening through the ears of listeners who are unfamiliar with the concept or the terminology around psychedelics. They hear psychedelics and they hear drugs, and then they hear drugs, they hear the war on drugs, and they immediately go back to Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, and like that era, and well, it's just bad. And so, like, how can you be doing this? It seems there's something wrong here that must not be good. So can you kind of give us a little bit like a summary of the historical backdrop and the atmosphere we're swimming in here around drugs and plant-based medicine?
The war on drugs, of course, is a backdrop for all humans, certainly in the United States of America, but that would transcend across all of North America. And I'm still learning about different countries and the way that war on drugs shows up in different cultures and different communities and different languages, and also different government systems, different systems of cartel and other realms of community safety and protection. We have a history of incredible violence, of incredible, othering people who are engaging in the medicines, the plant teachers that they have access to. And it's so interesting because with big pharma, the way insurance industries work, our healthcare is an industry, first of all. And I think many people don't have access to the medications that they are seeking. Also, people have like one approved drug dealer, and that's your psychiatrist, that's your med manager. Maybe in some cases it's your doctor, but we all have our go-to drug dealers.
Yeah.
And the way that this binary light of like, what are good drugs, good medicines, bad medicines, good doctors, bad doctors, there's just such a binary to that way of thinking. And unfortunately, it also causes a lot of violence. How many people do I know and love who I've lost friends to the war on drugs. I've lost friends to addictive cycles. I've lost friends to overdoses. I've lost friends to also the prison industrial complex. I've lost friends who have been in not lost friends, but certainly had separation and distance, because we all have a trauma narrative around how the war on drugs has hurt ourselves personally or someone who we love. I've had a few people now, actually, in the last few years that I've been working as a psychedelic therapist, that I tell them, this is the work that I do. And I've had two people who I saw them energetically and in their posture completely shift, like they were offended by me telling them what I do. And I have to say, I actually hold a pretty compassionate approach to that, because I understand that not everyone is interested in, and not everyone is safe to reclaim drugs, medicines, medications, right? We're not just talking about people who are curious about trying LSD. We're also talking about people who have all kinds of feelings about being seen by a medical professional, being prescribed a medicine that they don't really have very much information understanding about. And they may or may not have very much support at all if they decide later down the road, I don't think I am aligned in body and spirit and health with this medication, with this substance, with this chemical. And so I think that it's interesting because we actually are all having the same conversations, whether we're talking about plant teachers, whether we're talking about medications as prescribed by a doctor, whether talking about spirit molecules, which I like to refer to in terms of MDMA, ketamine, LSD. These are molecules that actually help us open up our spirits. But I also will say all of these medications, medicines, also alcohol, let's just add that in here, psychedelics, these also all can be used as a tool of manipulation, as a tool of spiritual abuse, as a tool of mind control, right? And I'm not referring to this spiritual devil way you can capture your spirit because you just took a tab of acid and boom, now you're mine.
You've given a foothold to the devil. Yeah, no.
Right.
Okay.
Which is also what I was told I was doing if I went to yoga and tried to clear my mind, or if I was, consulting with the tarot cards. These are all ways. So I really validate that. If someone is like, I don't think that is for me, that's a practice in trusting your intuition. It's probably not.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like you are being invited to commune with a medicine as a teacher in a safe way with a safe person, I don't think you can live without that experience. You only ever always have. Only ever always have lived without that experience. So if you're feeling a pressure like I need to do this, or my partner or my friend is pressuring me to do that, I will take the dare, conversation on peer pressure and say, yeah, that's a part I will take. I don't think anyone should feel pressured to take medicines, medications, drugs, especially not with all the information needed to inform your consent. But I think that goes for doctors. I think that goes for the medical industry as well.
I love that you brought forward consent there, because I think that is maybe one of the big categories that is missing. And I would say particularly, as you said, for women, this is an opportunity for you to take back some agency and some power. And if that looks like you saying, I don't feel comfortable doing that, then that is healing right there. I love the gentleness and the compassion that you're bringing, because there is such a stigma around this, and it's not just stigma. I mean, some people might carry actual eternal annihilation anxiety around doing anything or even having this conversation. So the gentleness you're bringing is so invitational. It's beautiful.
I don't think this is entirely disconnected from the purity culture concepts, right? Of God is going to punish you. If you have premarital sex, he could punish you with an unexpected, unwanted pregnancy. He could punish you with an STD. He could punish you with now you have to marry this person because it's God's will. Marriage is punishment as well. That's another tangent. We don't have to go. But I think that there's also this fear, and it's valid. I understand the fear of if I sit with a plant teacher, with a spirit molecule, with a drug, otherwise with a medication prescribed by my doctor, and I have a negative experience, that means I shouldn't have done this. This means if I have a scary experience, if I have a overwhelming experience, if I have an underwhelming experience, I think that we have to break that binary of good trip, bad trip. Some of my most heavy, some of my most uncomfortable transcendences have also resulted in some of the most insightful integration. Transcendences, communions with my plant teachers, with spirit molecules that have truly changed the way that I am connected to myself, connected to others, connected to my purpose in this world. But some of those journeys were not cute. Some of those journeys were not fun, And so I think also breaking this idea of drugs, psychedelics, people are doing this just to party and rave. And I love a good dance floor. I will rock it. But also, that's not all that we're talking about when we're talking about psychedelic healing, when we're talking about ceremonial space. We're actually not talking about that when we are talking about ceremonial space. We're talking about an intention, and with oftentimes community-based transcendence, exploration, where we're all in this trip, this magic school bus ride together, but with the purpose of abundance, the purpose of expansion, exploration of the unconscious and the collective conscious.
I want to get your take, actually, from, especially as someone who has facilitated psychedelic journeys in integration, what are some of the most common ways you've seen religious trauma and spiritual abuse surface? I have a lot of clients who, they'd say, well, they might say, I don't know that they would say this, but they might say, I haven't had a very specific trauma. There's not this moment or this person that truly comes to mind. But it's this water you've been steeped in. For someone like that entering into a psychedelic journey, what might they encounter? What have you seen people encounter in themselves?
I do feel especially working with a lot of people from other fundamentalist religious cultures, it has been incredible to be able to witness people tap into that capacity that they have within them and be that belongs to you. I didn't give that to you. That's yours. Mm-hmm. And also being able to support people in reclaiming sovereignty over their healing trajectory, over their trippy trip, over their journey. Yep. And just, there can be so much, I think, support even in that practitioner-client dynamic of, I'm not directing this. I have no idea what's going to come to conscious awareness, to somatic sensation. I have no idea what this is going to bring forward for you. I'm entering the unknown with you. I'm not receiving an IM of ketamine or anything of that sort. I'm here, I'm sober, I'm present to your journey, but you are entering the unknown, and I'm here to hold the container. But there's something really powerful that I've seen where I think people, sometimes they'll land from their ketamine transcendence and they'll just be thank you, Kayla, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I just take their hand and I put it back on their chest and I just say thank you for creating this space for yourself, investing in yourself. Because I think there can be this is where the spiritual abuse piece comes in. Mm-hmm. I think there is something so holy, so grand, something I didn't even think that was possible to feel that way. We can project that credit for my healing onto another person that I'm with. And so I do think that in the psychedelic and ceremonial spaces, whether it's clinical or community-based, aka underground, all of these spaces are unfortunately vulnerable to spiritual abuse because we're not always taking inventory of those power dynamics and co-creating that journey together. And so that is the piece where another cycle that I am breaking is the evangelical cycle of being an evangelist for anything. I have loved my journeys with my plant teachers. I am incredibly grateful in the ways that I've been invited to commune with many a medicine. And I do not think this is for all people. I don't think it is for all times. I also I'm not trying to evangelize that everyone needs to get their ass into a ketamine clinic. No, I don't think so. And I don't think that I haven't always just seen wonders. I have had people have what they probably perceived as a regressive experience, kind of like, whoa, I actually feel more depressed or more overwhelmed now than I did before. And to me, I don't want a silver linings playbook. I don't want to gaslight someone's heaviness, and also honoring like this is what this medicine has brought to surface for us to integrate together. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm here through this, but let's explore why is it that in this transcendent space, you've been met with a grief that you cannot shake. You've been met with something that like, this isn't going to move until you move. Because that's another piece, is this idea that psychedelics are just this Band-Aid. This is going to fix it, or it's a pill, right? Psychedelics are different from medication. This is not something that anyone needs to be in relationship with psychedelics every day. No one needs to be doing journey work to the point where you can't be present to this dimension. I got too many responsibilities in this dimension to be that interdimensional about my time. For me, Kayla Felten, in 2025, that would be irresponsible for me to be prioritizing the majority of my time and space in other dimensions. I got so many responsibilities in this one.
Oof, wow. I mean, you're just like bringing so many good things here. Wow. The projecting onto God piece is massive. This idea that like I have to give back what is like ultimately too big for me. The work is actually to just like own it. And that doesn't mean that you are somehow selfish or like bloating your ego. It's actually just aligning with your humanity. And you're not, but that is the whole idea. Like it creates dependency, which is true of our religious structures, our economic structures. I mean, God is basically a very esoteric image of big pharma. It's like, if you really want healing, you've got to come to me. If you really want a good life, you've got to come to me. I mean, you're like the witch in the woods that, the characters are told to go seek wisdom from, but you're not evangelizing. Evangelism of any kind is, it's birthed out of the idea that you have the fundamental truth and other people don't, therefore you need to go tell them. And you're like, hey, this isn't for everybody, but if spirit, if universe somehow airdrops you into this or makes you wander through the woods, and we find each other, then we'll do some work. And I just love it.
And that's my approach too to medicines, that I'm not looking for where's the shamans in town. That's a complicated, time is not real, right? But I've moved to Mexico over the course of the last 4 years. And coming here as a white woman, as a psychedelic practitioner, I was like, okay, how am I going to embody this openness to like, what is my proximity to medicine work and psychedelic advocacy and ultimately survivor care? And I knew I didn't want to come here and be like, where's the shamans in town? I'm going to go look for opportunities to try this and this and this and this. I've always been able to trust that what is for me cannot miss me. And you want to know something interesting? I got here, and a few months later, I finally got myself connected to the medicine man who held my first mushroom ceremony here in Mexico. I wasn't looking. I was just looking to manage my scraggly ass hair. And boom, I was connected. And I just was like, these are the types of experiences that I don't have to go searching. And I hope that for anyone who's hearing this, who's thinking, I am curious, maybe this podcast is that initial invitation of, I connect to that. Maybe this would be a good medicine for me to commune with, to explore with. Just trusting that when you speak that into the universe, I know this is going to get woo-woo here, but this is my authentic truth. Speaking it into the universe, and being open to where the medicine will meet you, where she will let you know, I'm here, where you will be invited to sit in ceremony, where you will be invited to ask a friend if they have had any experiences with psychedelics. And yeah, they have a really powerful story as well. And people are able to network in that way. But I think that it's very possible and easy for white people especially to find ourselves in a very colonized proximity to looking for ceremony, looking for medicine. And that's just something that I can't say I'm an expert, but that's something that I am trying to integrate into my current immigration journey in another country, where there are many ceremonies and many medicines that are indeed ancestral to these people, to these lands.
Yeah, because if you can leave the church, but if you don't leave consumer capitalism, or if you don't, leave evangelicalism, but you retain this idea that like there is a supreme way of living, you'll find yourself right back in that, like, and not know it. You'll be so kind of passionate to the extent that it's like, I've found something that others haven't found, and then it in my work as in the Jungian side of things, it's like it takes something that was a gift of the unconscious and pulls it into this kind of the conscious ego that then says, well, this is my identity. I'm someone who does psychedelic journeys, and that is a primary identifier of who I am. And so it suddenly loses its potency to be transformative for you.
Like narcissism.
Ooh, okay.
I know we're going to fully enter. Just so you know, you can do a Google search. There's plenty to explore in psychedelic narcissism. Because this is not just an issue, a situation of like, I had, 10 grams of mushrooms, so now I'm God,
Yeah.
But I think people can often have this very evangelical approach to, wow, I had an amazing experience, and now I want to teach everyone else how to have my experience. Guess what? No one else is ever going to have it. You won't either. You're never going to have a trip that is identical to the one you just had. So you cannot teach someone how to have your relationship, your communion with this medicine, because the medicine is the teacher. You're not the teacher. But I think that we see this, and I've seen this in deconstruction realms as well, where people are like, pretty fresh into like deconverting or deconstructing from organized religion, and now they're wanting to be a deconstruction coach. Do I think that is inherently wrong? No. I'm very grateful, and I've had many survivors that I've held space for say that they really do appreciate the work that they've been able to do in the safety of a coaching relationship. But I do think there is a certain, I just think that supporting other people deserves a little bit of a greater reverence, a little bit more of a preparation, And if you're still integrating the insights that are coming forth for you, I'll always be in a posture of deconstruction. I'll always be in a posture of integration. It's not that I'll ever arrive at being a fully integrated human or a fully deconstructed spirit. I do think, though, that we all deserve to have this space held for us to be really reverent about this is also some potent shit. I'm not in charge here.
Yeah.
And while I've spent my career working with ketamine in a clinic in the Twin Cities, I'm going to be honest, I have reservations about ever doing work with the mushrooms in a clinical setting. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I do think that a lot of research does continue to need to be brought forth around the holy capacity potential with these beings. But part of my reason for that, part of my hesitancy is if I'm doing clinical work in which my license is liable for whatever happens in this room, I feel very different working with a spirit molecule,
Yeah,
with a doctor
100%.
administering it, by the way, than I do with bringing in literal beings. These mushrooms are beings. These are spirits. I don't even know who all is in the room.
Yeah.
If we're working with this, I don't know who all is in the room, and I do not want my license to be liable for whatever else is going to show up, come up, I'm not against it, and I believe that there are definitely practitioners who have received that call, who feel that is for them. I'm just saying, I don't know that that's my call. I would have to have so many protections in place before I would enter that space in a clinical context.
Yeah. Well, it makes so much sense. It's like the clinical space is so like non-metaphysical and, it's very much scientific. And then you're literally bringing in metaphysical experiences and entities, engaging with them. And so that is a mind fuck. It's like, how can you even, these two things don't communicate. I'm curious, Kayla, as we kind of wrap up here, I'm thinking of people I have engaged with, known clients who live in really they live in deserts of medicinal care, right? Like I had a client once say the nearest psychiatrist that could prescribe medication to them was like an hour and a half away, and they were booked out for 6 months, right? So there is like this, that's a real access problem. And then, most of the time in that case, like someone might not be like even open to a conversation around psychedelics, but let's say that someone is like, hey, this whole like SSRI, like meeting with a doctor who doesn't understand that like I'm a deeply spiritual person and like that's not a part of this, but they want to connect. They want healing. They need help. Like, what is available for someone, say, living in the breadbasket of the United States, Oklahoma, Arkansas, what can they do? Where can they go from that location virtually or whatever to connect with the work you're doing or just psychedelics in general?
I have had the pleasure of facilitating a number of integration circles virtually in the past few years. There are a number of psychedelic advocacy entities, individuals, organizations. Psychedelic support is kind of like a Psychology Today of psychedelic practitioners. So that is one place you can go to see if there is anyone licensed in your state. Some people might want to start with just working with a psychedelic-informed therapist. Just saying, I'm curious about this. I'm wondering what might be a good fit for me. At no point will that psychedelic therapist likely be at liberty to tell you this is what I recommend, because we are trying to demedicalize, right, this relationship that we have with psychedelics. This is not a medication. This is not an intervention. This is a holy communion if you want it. But it will always be yours to pursue. Also, I will just let you know that mushrooms, for example, cannabis, for another example, are medicines that many people can cultivate themselves in their homes. So if you are having any concerns around how do I access this, who do I purchase it from? What a beautiful way to already be in relation with your medicine if you are the OG cultivator. And that's a sustainable way as well to be in communion with your medicine. And there are a number of organizations also that will be able to teach you beginning to end how to cultivate your own medicine.
I love that. Well, first of all, just thank you for opening up this conversation. I know it's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that we could explore, but like you said, there will be people who listen to this and something gets sparked. Like, oof, that aligns with something in me that needs to take a step. And with that, how can people connect to the work you're doing?
For one, the Reclamation Collective. That's one way that people can connect to spiritual abuse support groups for survivors, reclamation support groups as well for people who are integrating the insights coming to conscious awareness around reclaiming identity, pleasure, autonomy. So that is more geared around people who are coming out of fundamentalist cultures, cults, and organized religion. Also, Intero Psychedelic is the psychedelic clinic that I've been a part of for the last 5 going on 6 years in Mendota Heights, Minnesota. They are only able to work with folks who are located in Minnesota during the course of their treatment. So I will just put that out there. And we have a number of therapists at Intero who do specialize on these intersections of religious trauma and spiritual abuse. And then lastly, I have a group of 9 or 10 women internationally who are meeting of our minds to explore on the intersections of community accountability and safety, and a reporting platform for people to report harms and abuses in psychedelic and ceremonial space. Because this is really the real reason why I've had to break this evangelical cycle, that I cannot tell you that this is all going to be rainbows and Skittles and Saturn and baby elephants, you know. I've had people experience all of the above on psychedelic transcendences, but also I have held space for so many people who have been harmed, and I've been in tragic proximity and awareness of people in my life who I've been connected to professionally and personally and familially, who have also harmed, who have exploited the sacred space of the altered state of this ceremonial psychedelic space. We have to be very intentional about how we do create space for people to be able to report, but also in a way that challenges kind of this idea of cancel culture, that also challenges this idea of survivor narratives belonging to anyone other than them. So that is truly where I hope you will find me in the upcoming years, is really aligning myself with survivor care, advocacy, in psychedelic and ceremonial space.
Oof. Thank you. I feel like the care that you're going about this work is like, how many church plants got started with like almost no care? Just like, yeah, I got this like download from, you know, the sky daddy that said I should go plant a church, you know, next to this other church. You know, you're dealing with some real high voltage stuff, and just the care that you're bringing to it is so trust building. And I'm excited because honestly, like being in Portland, there are a lot of people engaging psychedelics frequently. And some of them, I'd say the ones I know are doing it very responsibly. But honestly, I don't know anyone who's doing it with the backdrop of religious trauma and spiritual abuse. You address a real need in the world. So thank you for paving the way and creating the trail that we might be able to wander down.
Thank you. In solidarity. Thank you so much, Michael. To anyone listening, I really do feel like if you feel like the inspiration, you feel the curiosity, sometimes that is the way that the Great Spirit invites us forth to commune with her in the various forms of plant teachers. But also, if there is any part of you that's like, this is not for me, trust that you're right. Trust that you're right. Trust that you will know that you have received the calling when it is there. And if it feels really complicated and it feels really icky, especially, it's not the time. And it might never be the time. And that doesn't mean that you're not having every access to enlightenment and expansion and the altered state of love and possibility. We can do this with our plant teachers. We can also do this without plant teachers. We can do it in a multitude of ways. This is just one avenue that some people are able to access to open the realm of what they ever thought was possible.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us, and just this invitation to bring back and call back our humanity and agency. Such a gift.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, Michael here. Hey, seriously, thank you for listening and engaging the Shadow Mike podcast and YouTube channel. I trust today's episode gave you something to reflect on or illuminated a new trailhead to your hidden life. If this episode resonated with you, you can subscribe, leave a comment or review, and share it with your people. This really helps spread the word and boosts our digital presence. Remember, growth isn't a straight line, and we're all figuring it out as we go. I'm grateful to be in this unfolding and excavating work with you. Until next time, be yourself. You've got a good self. And remember, it is all a gift.